Stories from the Shadows is a Lemon Difficult studio production. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/lemondifficult for free access to all our podcast episodes, behind-the-scenes content for the Key of Dreams and more. That's patreon.com/lemondifficult. Welcome to Stories from the Shadows, a collection of weird tales of the mysterious and macabre, an offering from the team at Lemon Difficult Studio, featuring the cast of our live immersive show The Key of Dreams Shadows Lengthen, and special guests. These stories are dark tales of misery and woe. Listener discretion is advised. Today, William Moore returns to conclude M.R. James's tale, The Haunted Dollhouse, which was commissioned by Mary Teck, wife of George V, as a book for her Queen Mary Dollhouse library. The Doll's House manuscript copy was just 3.8 centimetres high, bound in full vellum with gold tooling and with a bookplate designed by E.H. Shepard. That particular dollhouse had a happier future than ours, as we shall see. We cross now to the village near Treowen, where Borderline radio broadcast is already in progress.
Borderline Radio presents Stories from the Shadows, pleasing terrors for the discerning listener.
By this time, the posset on the fire was steaming, and the nurse poured it into a small two-handed silver bowl and brought it to the bedside. The old man seemed disinclined for it and was waving it away, but the lady and the nurse together bent over him and evidently pressed it upon him. He must have yielded, for they supported him into a sitting position and put it to his lips. He drank most of it in several draughts, and they laid him down. The lady left the room, smiling good night to him, and took the bowl, the bottle, and the silver saucepan with her. The nurse returned to the chair, and there was an interval of complete quiet. Suddenly, the old man started up in his bed, and he must have uttered some cry, for the nurse started out of her chair and made but one step of it to the bedside. He was a sad and terrible sight, flushed in the face, almost to blackness, the eyes glaring whitely, both hands clutching at his heart, foam at his lips. For a moment the nurse left him, ran to the door, flung it wide open, and, one supposes, screamed aloud for help, then darted back to the bed and seemed to try feverishly to soothe him, to lay him down, anything. But as the lady, her husband, and several servants rushed into the room with horrified faces, the old man collapsed under the nurse's hands and lay back, and the features, contorted with agony and rage, relaxed slowly into calm. A few moments later, light showed out to the left of the house, and a coach with flambeaux drove up to the door. A white-wigged man in black got nimbly out and ran up the steps, carrying a small leather trunk-shaped box. He was met in the doorway by the man and his wife, she with her handkerchief clutched between her hands, he with a tragic face, but retaining his self-control. They led the newcomer into the dining room, where he set his box of papers on the table, and, turning to them, listened with a face of consternation at what they had to tell. He nodded his head again and again, threw out his hand slightly, declined, it seems, offers of refreshment and lodging for the night, and within a few minutes came slowly down the steps, entering the coach and driving off the way he had come. As the man in blue watched him from the top of the steps, a smile not pleasant to see stole slowly over his fat white face. Darkness fell over the whole scene as the lights of the coach disappeared. But Mr. Dillett remained sitting up in the bed. He had rightly guessed that there would be a sequel. The house front glimmered out again before long, but now there was a difference. The lights were in other windows, one at the top of the house, the other illuminating the range of coloured windows of the chapel. How he saw through these is not quite obvious, but he did. The interior was as carefully furnished as the rest of the establishment, with its minute red cushions on the desks, its Gothic stall canopies, and its western gallery and pinnacled organ with gold pipes. On the centre of the black and white pavement was a bier. 4 tall candles burned at the corners. On the bier was a coffin covered with a pall of black velvet. As he looked, the folds of the pall stirred. It seemed to rise at one end. It slid downwards. It fell away, exposing the black coffin with its silver handles and nameplate. One of the tall candlesticks swayed and toppled over. Ask no more, but turn, as Mr. Dillett hastily did, and look in at the lighted window at the top of the house, where a boy and girl lay in 2 truckle beds, and a 4-poster for the nurse rose above them. The nurse was not visible for the moment, but the father and mother were there, dressed now in mourning, but with very little sign of mourning in their demeanour. Indeed, they were laughing and talking with a good deal of animation, sometimes to each other, and sometimes throwing a remark to one or other of the children, and again laughing at the answers. Then the father was seen to go on tiptoe out of the room, taking with him, as he went, a white garment that hung on a peg near the door. He shut the door after him. A minute or 2 later, it was slowly opened again, and a muffled head poked round it. A bent form of sinister shape stepped across to the truckle beds, and suddenly stopped, threw up its arms, and revealed, of course, the father, laughing. The children were in agonies of terror, the boy with the bedclothes over his head, the girl throwing herself out of bed into her mother's arms. Attempts at consolation followed. The parents took the children on their laps, patted them, picked up the white gown and showed them there was no harm in it, and so forth, and at last, putting the children back into bed, left the room with encouraging waves of the hand. As they left it, the nurse came in, and soon the light died down. Still Mr. Dillett watched, immovable. A new sort of light, not of lamp or candle, a pale, ugly light, began to dawn around the door case at the back of the room. The door was opening again. The seer does not like to dwell upon what he saw entering the room. He says it might be described as a frog, the size of a man, but it had scanty white hair about its head. It was busy about the truckle beds, but not for long. The sound of cries, faint as if coming out of a vast distance, but even so infinitely appalling, reached the ear. There were signs of a hideous commotion all over the house. Lights moved along and up, and doors opened and shut, and running figures passed within the windows. The clock in the stable turret told 1, and darkness fell again. It was only dispelled once more to show the house front. At the bottom of the steps, dark figures were drawn up in 2 lines, holding flaming torches. More dark figures came down the steps, bearing first one, then another small coffin, and the lines of torch-bearers with the coffins between them moved silently onward to the left. The hours of the night passed on, never so slowly, Mr. Dillett thought. Gradually he sank down from sitting to lying in his bed, but he did not close an eye, and early next morning he sent for the doctor. The doctor found him in a disquieting state of nerves and recommended sea air. To a quiet place on the east coast he accordingly repaired by easy stages in his car. One of the first people he met on the seafront was Mr. Chittenden, who, it appeared, had likewise been advised to take his wife away for a bit of a change. Mr. Chittenden looked somewhat askance upon him when they met, and not without cause. "Well, I don't wonder you being a bit upset, Mr. Dillett." "What? Yes, well, I might say horrible upset, to be sure, seeing what me and my poor wife went through ourselves. But I put it to you, Mr. Dillett, one of 2 things. Was I going to scrap a lovely piece like that on the one hand, or was I going to tell customers I'm selling you a regular picture palace drama in real life of the olden time, billed to perform regular at 1 o'clock a.m. Why, what would you have said yourself? And next thing you know, 2 justices of the peace in the back parlour, and poor Mr. and Mrs. Chittenden off in a spring cart to the county asylum, and everyone in the street saying, I thought it had come to that. Look at the way that man drank. And me next door, or next door but one, to a total abstainer, as you know. Well, there was my position. What? Me have it back in the shop? But what do you think? No, but I'll tell you what I can do. You shall have your money back, bar the £10 I paid for it, and you make what you can. Later in the day, in what is offensively called the smoke room of the hotel, a murmured conversation between the two went on for some time. "How much do you really know about that thing? And where it came from?" "Honest, Mr. Dillett, I don't know the house. Of course it came from the lumber room of a country house, that anyone could guess. But I'll go as far as say this, that I believe it's not 100 miles from this place. Which direction and how far I've no notion. I'm only judging by guesswork. The man as I actually paid the cheque to ain't one of my regular men, and I've lost sight of him. But I have the idea that this part of the country was his beat. And that's every word I can tell you. But now, Mr. Dillett, there's one thing that rather physics me. That old chap. I suppose you saw him drive up to the door." "I thought so. Now, would he have been the medical man, do you take it?" "My wife would have it so, but I stuck to it that was the lawyer, because he had papers with him, and one he took out was folded up." "I agree," said Mr. Dillett. "Thinking it over, I came to the conclusion that was the old man's will, ready to be signed." "Just what I thought," said Mr. Chittenden. "And I took it that will would have cut out the young people, eh?" "Well, well. It's been a lesson to me, I know that. I shan't buy no more dolls' houses, nor waste no more money on the pictures. And as to this business of poisoning Grandpa, well, if I know myself, I never had much of a turn for that. Live and let live. That's been my motto throughout life, and I ain't found it a bad one." Filled with these elevated sentiments, Mr. Chittenden retired to his lodgings. Mr. Dillett next day repaired to the local institute, where he hoped to find some clue to the riddle that absorbed him. He gazed in despair at a long file of the Canterbury and York Society's publications of the parish registers of the district. No print resembling the house of his nightmare was among those that hung on the staircase and in the passages. Disconsolate, he found himself at last in a derelict room, staring at a dusty model of a church in a dusty glass case. Model of St. Stephen's Church, Coxham, presented by J. Merriweather, Esquire, of Ilbridge House, 1877, the work of his ancestor, James Merriweather, died 1786. There was something in the fashion of it that reminded him dimly of his horror. He retraced his steps to a wall map he had noticed, and made out that Ilbridge House was in Coxham Parish. Coxham was, as it happened, one of the parishes of which he had retained the name when he glanced over the file of printed registers, and it was not long before he found in them the record of the burial of Roger Milford, aged 76, on the 11th of September, 1757, and of Roger and Elizabeth Merriweather, aged 9 and 7, on the 19th of the same month. It seemed worthwhile to follow up this clue, frail as it was, and in the afternoon he drove out to Coxham. The east end of the north aisle of the church is a Milford chapel, and on its north wall are tablets to the same persons. Roger, the elder, it seems, was distinguished by all the qualities which adorn the father, the magistrate, and the man. The memorial was erected by his attached daughter Elizabeth, who did not long survive the loss of a parent ever solicitous for her welfare, and of 2 amiable children. The last sentence was plainly an addition to the original inscription. A yet later slab told of James Merriweather, husband of Elizabeth, who in the dawn of life practised, not without success, those arts which, had he continued their exercise, might in the opinion of the most competent judges have earned for him the name of the British Vitruvius, but who, overwhelmed by the visitation which deprived him of an affectionate partner and a blooming offspring, passed his prime and age in a secluded yet elegant retirement. His grateful nephew and heir indulges a pious sorrow by this too brief recital of his excellencies. The children were more simply commemorated. Both died on the night of the 12th of September. Mr. Dillett felt sure that in Ilbridge House he had found the scene of his drama. In some old sketchbook, possibly in some old print, he may yet find convincing evidence that he is right. But the Ilbridge House of today is not that which he sought. It is an Elizabethan erection of the 40s, in red brick with stone coins and dressing. A quarter of a mile from it, in a low part of the park, backed by ancient, stag-horned, ivy-strangled trees and thick undergrowth, are marks of a terraced platform overgrown with rough grass. A few stone balusters lie here and there, and a heap or two, covered with nettles and ivy, of wrought stones with badly carved crockets. This, someone told Mr. Dillett, was the site of an older house. As he drove out of the village, the hall clock struck 4, and Mr. Dillett started up and clapped his hands to his ears. It was not the first time he had heard that bell. Awaiting an offer from the other side of the Atlantic, the doll's house still reposes, carefully sheeted, in a loft over Mr. Dillett's stables, whither Collins conveyed it on the day when Mr. Dillett started for the sea coast.
That was Stories from the Shadows, presented by Borderline Radio. Join us again tomorrow at the intersection of sanity and revelation.
Thank you for listening to Stories from the Shadows, an audio production from Lemon Difficult Studio. If you enjoyed today's story, be sure to follow us on socials and join our Patreon at patreon.com/lemondifficult for exclusive rewards. Members of our free tier have access to all episodes of Stories from the Shadows, as well as behind-the-scenes content and the latest updates on our live immersive show, The Key of Dreams: Shadows Lengthen. Until next time, dream by daylight.